Hi everyone, welcome back to another Math9 video. Today we're looking at 2.2 part 1, simple interest. You'll find this all in your workbook, but I'll quickly run through it. Interest is a fee charged by a bank or credit union. This is what I'm looking at here. When you borrow money from them, and it's called a loan. Could also be a fee the bank pays you for keeping your money in a savings account at the bank. So annual interest rate is the fee charged by a bank in 1 year as a percentage, and our simple interest formula, you'll know this formula over time, is I equals PRT. And this is the most important part today, so we'll sort of zoom in on this. In this formula, the I represents the simple interest. The P is the principal amount, or the amount that you're putting in or that you're borrowing. The R is the annual interest rate. It's usually given to us as a percentage, but we usually convert it or change it into a decimal. And then the T is our time in years. So if it's not in years, our first step would be to change it into years so that we're able to work with it and use it in our formula. So let's take a look at some examples of how this might show up. Here's the first example. It says Joe deposits $200 in an account at his bank. The interest rate is 6%, so let's take that and change it. 6 over 100, which is 0.06 is a better way for us to say 6% there. If he deposits $200, that would be our principal, the amount that he's putting in. How much interest will he earn? So that's going to be our, how much interest will he earn? That's our I value in 3 years. So that would be our T value there. So let's put this all together. I is what we're looking for, equals P, which is $200, times R, which is our 0.06, times our T, which in this case is 3 years. So in this first example, it's nice and straightforward in that it's given to us with the I isolated. That's the part that we're looking for, the interest. And we would just punch this into our calculator, and when we do that, we would find that the interest is $36. So I would take this and put it into a sentence. Joe will earn $36 in interest. The reason we put it into a sentence is to show that yes, we know how to plug numbers into a formula and spit out an answer, but we also understand what it is we just found. That's the reason we put it into a sentence. I would say at this point, hit pause, try this next example on your own, and when you're ready, hit play again so you can see the solution. Okay, similar type of idea. I'm going to get the formula out of the way. We can just write it down again. It says Joe borrows $900 to fix his car. So the $900 would be the principal amount that he's borrowing. The bank charges 7% interest for 2 years. I'm going to get rid of that. 7% would be 0.07, and 2 years would be our time, so T equals 2. Find the total amount Joe will owe the bank. Okay, let's go through this. Whoops, this is not going so well. I equals PRT. There's our formula. Let's start plugging things in. So I equals, our principal was that $900. We already talked about it. Times R, which was up here, 0.07. And our T was right here, times 2. So our first step, or maybe it's not our first step, is to multiply this all out together. When I multiply this all out together, I find that my interest is equal to $126. This says find the total amount Joe will owe the bank. So to get the total amount Joe's going to owe the bank, I would take the interest plus I would have to add to it the initial amount that he borrowed. So plus the $900 that he borrowed. That gives me $1,026. So Joe owes the bank $1,026 after everything is said and done. So to make sense of this, he has to pay back the original amount that he borrowed, the $900, plus it's like the $126 bought him some time. That's the interest that he would pay on top of what he already borrowed. Just to put things into perspective, that's a pretty high interest rate. So it makes you realize, the values that you're working with if you're borrowing money from a bank. Okay, Jill needs to borrow $500 for only 9 months. The bank charges 5.5% interest. How much will Jill owe the bank? Okay, well, let's put things into perspective. If Jill needs to borrow $500, that would be the principal that she's borrowing. For only 9 months, okay, we are used to seeing this in terms of years. So in order to convert this into years, I would think how many months in a year? We all know that it's 12 months in a year. So to do this, I would have to do 9 over 12. So the number of months that we have in a year divided by, the number of months that she's borrowing it for divided by the number of months that we have in a year. So 9 over 12. And if we change this into a decimal, because that's probably easier for us to work with, that's the same thing as 0.75. The 5.5% interest would be like saying 5.5%. We would move this over 2 spots in order to change it to a decimal. So do you see that it would be 0.055 when we're talking about the interest rate? We move it over 2 spots. So in order to work with our formula, I equals PRT, we would have the initial principal amount would be $500. The R value would be 0.055, and the T value would be the 0.75. So the only thing with this question is we had a few more initial calculations to do in order to set up the equation. But once we do that, it's just again a matter of punching this into our calculator. And when we do that, we get 20.625, but because it goes 625, I'm going to round it up to 63. So just a reminder of how the rules of rounding work. It says how much will Jill owe the bank? So do you see that we also want to add into that the initial $500 that she borrowed? So when we add that in, she would owe the bank $520.63. So Jill owes the bank $520.63. Okay, so I hope that that is starting to make sense. We're going to skip ahead to the next example. Find the annual rate of interest required for $1,500 to earn $75.50 interest in 200 days. Okay, so I equals PRT. if we're earning $75.50 in interest, we're going to put that into here. $75.50 in interest equals for $1,500. Okay, let's plug that in here. $1,500 times R. That's what we're looking for. Find the annual interest rate. So that's what we're looking for here. In 200 days. Okay, so we have a calculation to do here. We're used to dealing with years. We know that there are 365 days in a year. So I'm going to do 200 divided by 365 days in a year. So in my formula, I'm going to write it this way. 200 over 365 days in a year. Just like that. Okay. If I want to figure out R, well, I'm going to start to work my way through these calculations. Maybe 200 divided by 365. Just because we have a lot of things to manage here, we're going to divide that out and change it to a decimal. 0.55. I'm going to round it to 2 decimal places. It's okay if you do that as well. Now, if we want to start to clean things up, we have $75.50 on the left. Do you see that this, and this are all being multiplied together? So to make things easier, I am going to multiply 1,500 times 0.55 so that I can clean things up. I get 825 R is what's left on the right side. Algebra is all about opposites, and I want to get just R by itself. So do you see that I would want to divide out this 825 to get rid of it, which means I also have to do that on the left side. When I do that, 825 over itself is just the number 1. 1 times R leaves us with just R. And on the left side, we would do 75.5 divided by 825, and it leaves me with an interest rate, or an answer, of 0.0915. So that's like saying 0.092 if I round it up. If you left it as 0.09, that's fine. But basically, when we usually give the interest rate, we give it as a percentage. So to work backwards, if I want to take a decimal and change it to a percent, I'd want to multiply by 100, which means moving this over 2 spots there. So 9.2% is the annual interest rate. Okay, so I hope that you found that helpful. Your work is page 62, numbers 1 to 3. You're going to do all of them, and that's it.